two others from the conference that had the pleasure of speaking there. Since then, Julia has been speaking around her state and now around the country about the importance of understanding the empathy gap. And now I am very pleased to introduce you to Julia Lazaruk from Nevada, who will share her empathy gap message with you. Julia Lazaruk.
Thank you, Carolyn, for having me here. I really appreciate it. And I'm honored and privileged to be here with you all today. And thank you for coming. Let's start by giving ourselves a round of applause for showing up. Thank you. So how many of you know the definition of empathy? Beautiful, thank you. And how many of you know the difference between empathy and sympathy? Thank you. Well, I'm really excited to be here today to talk about closing the empathy gap and about the importance of knowing the difference between empathy and sympathy so that we can close the gap. A lot of us here are advocates. We belong to organizations. We started organizations, and it's our responsibility to get our point across, to engage people in our organization, and to get the resources that we need to make a difference and to help people. When I first started Prison, the Hidden Sentence, I didn't know how to reach out to people. And after talking to others, I learned the skills I needed to help others, and I'm going to share some of those with you today. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about my history, and if it's okay, I'd like to share a vulnerable story with you. The most painful moment in my life was sitting next to my parents on that cold wooden bench, looking at the jury, looking at the attorneys, looking at the judge, and seeing my little brother there, and I could feel his fear. This was my little brother that used to follow me around, and it was me and him against the world. And here I was helpless. There was nothing that I could do to protect him. And then when the judge called him up for sentencing, it just rang through my ears. The judge said, "Guilty." And he sentenced him to a life in prison. And I was in shock. I didn't know what to do, so I ran up to him and I tried to hug him, but he was stiff. And I needed something from him. And I got his diamond ring and his watch. And even though that was 20 years ago, I remember it like yesterday. And I still have that watch and that ring. Have you ever had that moment that took your breath away because it was something so imaginable, like something stabbed you in the heart? Have you ever felt that pain? And bless you to those of you that have never felt the pain of losing a loved one. So after the trial, my parents and I lived on separate sides of the state, and I looked into their vacant eyes as I said goodbye, and I got into my car, and it drove me to my friend Terry. And Terry sat there and listened to me as I told her the story and as I cried, and she supported me. And after I got myself together, I drove home and I told a few other friends. And they just said, "Julie, don't worry about it. It'll be okay. He'll be okay." And I could feel that they felt sorry for me and they pitied me. So Terry was showing me empathy. She was with me. She supported me. Empathy is feeling with somebody. And my other friends, they didn't. They were showing me sympathy. And that's why it's really important to know the difference. I felt supported by Terry. I was with her. She was with me. However, my other friends don't really talk to me anymore. And so when they stopped talking to me, I didn't know how to react to people. So I stopped talking about it, and the bars went up around my heart, and I became a prisoner. When the judge rendered a sentence to my brother for life in prison, he also rendered a life sentence to me and my family. And for me to be here, standing in front of you and talking today, shows that I am no longer imprisoned. During the 15 years that my brother was in prison, I felt all kinds of emotions. I felt shame. I felt fear. I felt anger. And I was sad. And I cried a lot. I would go out with my friends, or I'd be at work, and something would overcome me and make me think of my brother, and I'd go into the bathroom stall and sit and cry. Then I'd get myself together and I'd come out, and nobody knew because I didn't tell anybody. It's the hidden sentence that we don't talk about. While our loved one is incarcerated, we're on the outside, we're outcarcerated, serving the sentence with them. During that time, I also stuffed myself. I stuffed myself with food and with alcohol, and I was numb. And I also kept people at arm's length. And then after 15 years, I woke up. I stopped stuffing. I took a hold of my life. I have a great job now. I have true friends. I've got a wonderful husband, and I know why I'm here. I got my power back. And this is what I did. I joined a support group, and I got to be around other people that knew what I was going through, and they supported me. I highly recommend that anybody that's going through anything traumatic to get professional help and to join a support group where there's people that can help you and know what it's like, what you're going through. The president of the support group befriended my brother, and he sent her money so that she could buy me flowers from him. So I got flowers for my 1-year anniversary. And I was so happy that he had somebody else that he could write to. I also had to learn how to set boundaries. My brother would call me at all different times, and even though I was really glad to hear from him, I would get sad because of where he was, and sometimes I'd get depressed. So I set boundaries. There were certain times and days that he could call me, and that way I would be prepared for the calls. I had to forgive not only myself, but everybody that was in the court, and I had to forgive my brother because there was a lot of anger that I had. And I also had to have sympathy for everybody in order to forgive them. I realized that I wasn't empathizing with my brother. So once I learned to be with him and feel with him, I was able to support him better. And lastly, I had to be true to myself. I had to stop stuffing. I had to take care of myself. And I'd like to read a saying from Brené Brown, who is a writer. She writes about empathy, sympathy, and vulnerability. That if we share our story with someone who responds with empathy and understanding, shame can't survive. Shame cannot survive where empathy thrives. So what can you do to close the empathy gap? The first thing is to maintain or regain your power. You need to come from a powerful, true place. And you need to have a voice, a strong voice to get your message across. And you need to be a good listener. Because when you're telling people your message, when you're sending your message out there, you might not know where somebody's coming from. So by active listening, asking them questions, finding out where they're coming from, you can speak with them and you can show them empathy. Because if we want empathy, if we want people to empathize with us, we need to empathize with them. And you need to be true to yourself. and you need to be true and respect other people. Because you might be sending your message to somebody or talking to somebody, and they might not agree with you. And it's okay for them to walk away. But remember, you've planted the seed, and the seed can grow. I'd like to read another saying by Mohsin Hamid. He's a Pakistani writer, and he said, empathy is about finding echoes of another person in yourself. So even when you're talking to somebody, if you don't have a lot in common, look for echoes of yourself in them. Find something in common, something that you can relate to, so that you can communicate, you can connect, and get your message across. I'd like to leave you with a story about Lawrence Anthony. Lawrence was a conservationist that lived in Zululand, South Africa, and he had a reserve called Tula Tula. There was 2 herds of elephants that were disrupting the villages, and they were going to be killed. So the villagers asked Lawrence if he could take them into his reserve. And he did, because he knew if he didn't, that they would no longer exist. And when they first got there, they kept escaping. He put up electric gates. He tried everything. And then he realized that he had to be with them. He had to see things from the elephant's perspective. And he actually lived with the elephants for a couple of years. And during that time, the elephants were safe. In 2012, when Lawrence passed away, the elephants made a 12-hour trek to his home. And they sat out there. They didn't eat, they didn't drink, they held a vigil for 2 days. And after the 2 days, they left. So by Lawrence empathizing with them, living with them, being with them, they showed him the highest level of empathy and respect. So I invite you all to respect each other, listen to each other, honor each other, hear each other, and support each other. And empathize like an elephant, and enjoy the conference. Thank you.